Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. You know, one of the things that, probably drives my kids crazy, I'm just guessing, although they're guilty of it too, is just striking up a conversation with anybody. I think it kind of annoys them, or at least it leads on that they're annoyed with the notion that I might say hi to a stranger or just have a conversation or make a quick little comment to just really anybody. But it's interesting. I ran across an article in a website called The Emotion Machine, Self-Improvement in the 21st Century. And the article is The Power of 10-Second Relationships, How Small Conversations Improve Well-Being. And it's an interesting article because I think it's interesting because it's not just someone's conjecture, but it's actually them drawing on research. But what they talked about in here is just the notion of having small conversations, or not even necessarily conversations, but just small interactions with people around us. And it's, we all run into people all the time. Even through the lockdown, we've encountered people. I mean, we might be masked up, but for the most part, many of us have continued to go to the store. We've gone to sporting events. We've just been out in the parks, walking around. And so we're always encountering people. And there's something refreshing about encountering people. I know that as we've gotten back into less and less of a lockdown, and I'm recording this, it's it's February 28th. This is probably coming out early May, just how our production and release cycle is working these days. So things may have changed in the last 2 months, but we can certainly harken back to the last 2 years. The 2-week pandemic to, flatten the curve ended up in being at least 2 years. But I know, as 2 weeks turned into 2 months and then 2 quarters and obviously 2 years, we have all felt a sense of isolation, and it's been hard. It's one of the things that's really been underreported. It's just how hard the whole notion of being disconnected from people has been. And we've done our best to be within Zoom conversations or Teams or whatever your preference is for that medium. But what I've noticed for me personally is just getting back amongst other people, strangers and people I know alike. It's just there's something comforting to it. Just something totally comforting to it. And so when I came across this article, I thought it was really kind of interesting. And it talks about that these, what they call, 10-second relationships or mini interactions, mini 10-second relationships, 10-second interactions are really kind of good for us. They tend to boost our mood, make us feel more connected. And, from time to time, these little relationships turn into bigger relationships. People listening probably can share stories to that effect. It's how we meet people to a degree. I met my wife. It was just a small interaction at work. And then it wasn't this great planned out thing. So I think a lot of relationships start small, but these don't necessarily have to turn into anything big to have a big impact on our lives. And one of the experiments they did was they just asked people to strike up, a conversation when they were, checking out, getting their coffee. Make eye contact, say hi, make a comment. That's a nice name that you have. And then they rated their overall mood. And these are research, university-based studies. And so there's, to a degree, these things have been vetted. By the time these things are reported in the Journal of Experimental Psychology or whatever journals are out there. There's one other journal that was referenced in here. Oh, the journal Social Psychology and Personality Science. You just don't get to put anything in there. Things that get in there are generally peer-reviewed and well-vetted. So it's not somebody who's done a 3-person study with the roommates in their quad suite at a university. It's somebody who is working with a renowned professor, somebody who's likely has got a PhD and using statistical analysis and dozens, if not hundreds, of subject matters going through and doing the study. But essentially what they talk about in here, well, the study that was in the Journal of Social Psychology and Personal Science, participants were asked to initiate a small talk conversation with the barista while they were getting their daily cup of coffee. And I don't know if it was the same place. Was it a Starbucks or just a individual place, or an independent coffee shop? And I guess you can argue different things for different places. I know Starbucks has somewhat of a training program for their baristas to really kind of help them become better at engaging with their clientele. But the notion is that we often treat these people as just cogs in what they term an economic exchange. We give our money, we get our stuff, and we're on with our day. But in this particular study, participants were asked to smile, make eye contact, and start a brief conversation with the barista. And then they walked away, and I'm sure did some sort of survey. It doesn't really say. But through that survey, it boosted their emotions and gave them a sense of belonging. I'm not sure if I shared it on here, but when we were probably just kind of getting through that first 6 months of the lockdown, going out to dinner, and there's a bar that's down the street from where we live, probably a couple miles away. We're in kind of a rural area. It's the only bar for miles, and so you get a lot of people in there, a lot of locals, a lot of regulars, and they have a big patio, which worked well for them because it was outdoors. And just being there with my wife and a woman that we know just saw us and came up and just gave us a big hug. And it was just, when the woman left, I turned to my wife and said, "Man, that felt good." Not that you don't hug your wife and hug your kids and things like that, but just that, it's just been so long to have that sort of interaction with, the person wasn't a stranger, but it was actually physical contact with somebody. And so, and that was it. Hey, good to see you guys. I hope all is well. Hug, on their way. And that was the end of it. And it really kind of was a great thing, just kind of, I don't say made my day, but certainly made that moment, made that evening. And so to have these little mini exchanges, these 10-second relationships, can certainly be a very powerful thing in our lives. And we have them frequently. We have these opportunities frequently. Even as we've gone through the lockdown, we have neighbors, we have people we're riding on buses and trains and planes with, and it's just a question of just making some sort of quick little comment, and all these things are the smile, the eye contact of how are you doing, is nothing more than saying, telling somebody, hey, listen, I see you. You're in my world. You're in my space. You're in my 6-foot radius, 10-foot radius, whatever the radius might be, and I acknowledge your existence. And as the article shares, we're all very pro-social. You might not think that. You might, I'm an introvert. I don't need people. Everybody needs people to a degree. I think the difference between introverts and extroverts is extroverts really get their power from it. Introverts don't necessarily get their power from being around people, but it doesn't mean that they don't need people at all. I consider myself somewhat of an introvert. I would prefer to, yeah, I'm among people all day, but in the evening, I would just prefer to be at home, turn the TV on, and just or watch YouTube or whatever. But I still need people, and it's still a good feeling to have people in our lives. And so it talks in the article just different things that you can do. It says here's all it takes to build a 10-second relationship with someone. Smile and wave hi. Ask how they're doing today. Hold the door for people. That's an easy one. Just pause a little bit and hold the door. Give a genuine please and thank you. Certainly opportunities for that. Somebody holding the door for us. Um, Give a genuine compliment. I like your hair. That's a nice shirt. You have a great smile. I guess that's hard if people are wearing masks. But you have a nice smile. It's good to see a good smile. Thanks for not wearing a mask. I think there's a whole lot we can do with that, and that just kind of lightens people's day. They smile at us, we smile back. Make an observation about the surroundings or the weather. The weather is a great thing. The weather's always happening. Well, pretty much anywhere in the world. We think of Florida as always being sunny and warm, and I've through the last year I've gotten to know a lot of people in Florida and spent a lot of time on Zoom with people in Florida, and I have to laugh because their cold days are it was 50 degrees when we're 50 degrees colder. But weather is always kind of a common point that we can talk about and have these 10-second relationships. Share a funny joke you recently heard. I don't know about that, but I will kid with people. I'll kid with total strangers about whatever. It's usually self-deprecating humor. Again, drives my kids crazy. They kind of roll their eyes. They're dad jokes. Start a conversation just while waiting with somebody. Text an old friend or a family member haven't spoken to in a while. It's interesting how people we know become strangers, not total strangers, but somewhat strangers in time. It says do a quick favor for somebody, carry groceries for them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything verbal. It can be, I was reading somewhere, just letting somebody have a parking spot, just acknowledging that they might be having a bad day and, okay, go ahead, you have that spot. I'll just drive a little further away. And that's something you just kind of give a wave and wave them in. Again, it's not verbal, but there's an interaction there. And the last thing it talks about is leaving a message, leaving a comment on a message board or an online forum. Social media is the perfect medium for that. Facebook, just not, hey, great post, or I mean, certainly that's something. But to, hey, your comment, the picture reminds me of. Do you remember the time we did? Even if it's somebody, what I like to do is when somebody who's connected to me, this works mainly on LinkedIn, somebody connects to me, makes a comment on a second generation person's comment, I will jump in on that comment as well, just to certainly help this person who's second generation. Arguably, I don't know, but it kind of it prompts an interaction with a person out of the blue. But one of the points it makes in the article about these still 10-second relationships is, no, they don't always turn into bigger relationships. They can, but that's not the expectation. That's not the point. It's just a point of, boosting, taking ourselves out of our comfort zones, boosting our mood. But the other thing that it talks about in here is says, when you take this mindset and you can literally say hi to anyone without hesitation, it transforms you into a more social person. Okay, follow this. And then the next time you actually do want to approach a specific person or flirt with someone, it's not as big of a deal because you're already comfortable talking to everyone and treating everyone with respect and decency. So it kind of builds a resiliency into our lives, if you will. I thought that was kind of a neat point to make, that it can help us. It can help us with this muscle, this social muscle of ours, just to reach out to people. And then there might be somebody that maybe it's that certain somebody you've had your eye on, that cute girl, that cute guy, and you want to strike up a conversation, and you're willing to just say, hey, how's your day going? Just kind of in an innocent fashion. If it goes nowhere, it's not like you've totally crashed and burned. You can just say, well, okay, it didn't go what I wanted it to do, how I wanted it. It didn't end how I wanted it to end, but it's no different than a lot of the interactions that I have that go nowhere. I'll just try again another time, and maybe it goes nowhere. And that plays into another comment in here. It says, I try to remind myself that people are like weather, and we can't always predict how they'll respond to us. Meaning, they might not respond in a positive way. They might not reciprocate. They might not wave. I was waving at a person who walks in our neighborhood and then finally talked to somebody. The person's never waving back to me. I'm like, that's just kind of weird. It's kind of mean. I'm taking the time to wave and say hi. And they're never waving back. They're never smiling. And I was talking to somebody in the neighborhood who knows the person. I said, yeah, it's just kind of weird. And he says, yeah, she's blind. You're not totally blind, but she's, legally blind, can't drive. She can walk, but she can't be driving. Probably doesn't see you. Oh, that explains it. So you can't predict how people are going to respond. Don't take it personally. You can't control that. What you can do is control you, and you're the one who can initiate these 10-second relationships. You can be the jumping off point for these 10-second relationships. So here I've spent almost 20 minutes talking on 10-second relationships. I encourage you to try and do this. Try and have a 10-second relationship today, or several, as you encounter people. Just kind of make it a goal of yours to just, talk to people, whoever they might be. The server at the restaurant, initiate something with them. Just don't have them be the order taker. But hey, how's your day going? I talked to people at the movie theater the other day. Hey, how are things going? I want the movie theaters to stay open, for God's sakes. How are things going? Are things picking up? It's going great. Yes, it's doing great. That's wonderful. I try and get here as often as I can. And, I don't know, it made me feel better talking to them. Hopefully it made them feel better. I don't know. Maybe they think I'm weird, like my kids think I'm weird. The best we can do in life is try.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.